Greetings and salutations, everyone. This is the last session of our online event for the first day of our World Futures Forum conference on October the 27th. It is, if you are in Washington, D.C. or Eastern Seaboard of the United States, it's 3 p.m. If you are in Berlin, it is 9 p.m. and you're probably out having a beer, such as it is. If you are in the Far East, India, you are asleep. And if you are in Australia and other parts of the world, Pacific, you are probably enjoying your dawn, your early morning rise at around 5, 6 o'clock. So welcome, welcome, welcome. It's the witching hour. I just want to say, we're here to talk about human futures. And I want you to imagine with me a headline for 2050 that talks about life in the afterlife. And in this afterlife story, we see this center where people have holographic images of their loved ones that they can go and visit in these let's call it curatoriums that curate the living memories of their loved ones. Is this the kind of future we want to see in the afterlife? Today, as we talk about human futures, we're here today because I really want to think about what does it mean to be human in this current world? Are we moving towards a xenogenic future where we create something different from what humanity is because of AI? Xenogen is a production of an offspring that is totally different from the parent. So if you think about human intelligence and artificial intelligence, are we going to be like the children of Sisyphus, giving birth to more and more confusion, or in a future that is dominated by humans everywhere? Or are we going to be living in a flourishing future? What is the human future that we want? And what's the human future that we want to co-create? When we think about where we are now, we can also think about the fact that we are in one who says a state of future shock. Futurists know this. We all talk about it all the time. We also talk about our fact of living in a VUCA world that is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And really understanding that in this world, many people are, especially because of the COVID pandemic, or the COVIDemic, as I like to call it, been thrust into the future, living online all the time, traveling around the world from the comfort of their homes by virtue of Zoom and other online platforms. And so when we talk about imagining the future, and we think about this AI-enabled world, we might imagine a world in which humans are living in ocean-based condominiums, which, like, we've turned our cruise ships into living condominiums because of climate rise, because of increasing taxes. And so it's a new way of living even for people as they get old. So that's the story we're creating based on the story we have so far, which has been one of conquest and competition and colonialism. A world that was first flat has now become round. A world that was first confined to planet Earth has now become a world that is expanding. We've had gods in the past that were serpents and spiders, and we have gods of the rivers and the seas. And today, some 3,000, 7,000, or a billion years later, depending on how you consider the creation story to be, here we are as Homo sapiens sapien that knows that they know. That hasn't changed. We know that we know. But that is beginning to change because of artificial intelligence. 7.5 billion people, 101 men for every 100 women. We have more than 193 nations, if you consider sub-nations within nations. And we speak more than 6,500 languages, even though some might be, quote unquote, dying or near death. This is the world that we live in. And this is what I mean by we. We, Homo sapiens sapien, we, humanity. Where are we now? We are in a space of breakdown or breakthrough. And as you think about that, what we need to be aware of is the fact that we are considering, if you will, that we could be in the worst of times or the best of times, depending on how you view the COVIDemic. 100 years ago, when we had the Spanish flu, one would say many million more people died. But then again, people weren't traveling around as much. So although it was called a global flu, it wasn't global in quite the same way. So what would happen to our economy or society in the next 2 decades? What disasters might befall us? How might they prevent it or mitigate it? How might telecommunications affect and be used by vulnerable populations? How will democracy take shape or not? These are some of the questions that we ask when we think about our very human future, the one that we must find, define, design, and come together with. And I like to say we can share our future by asking 4 questions that we answer. The first question is how we share a planet. The second is how we share a rule book. Sorry, how we share our humanity. The third is how we share rule books, and then how we share decision making. When you think about these 4 questions, there's several sub-questions, some of which could be, issue of the rule book is all the global financial architecture, maritime and security laws, the laws that keep our astronauts in space, transnational crime, planet, we're talking about deforestation, ocean resources. These are all shared things. Humanity, we have peacekeeping issues, migrant issues. But for decision making, which is the one I think I want to focus on, is who is at the table? How will we decide the rule books? What data will we use or will be drowned in the deluge of data? And how will we treat AI? We know that the AI revolution is really creating transformative changes and radically disrupting every industry, every business sector, all of society, from healthcare to education to the way we manufacture, to the way we travel. We're hearing more and more about AI-enabled airplanes that will no longer need pilots. And as we think about this revolution, on the one hand, we talk about the promise, and the other, we talk about the peril. So yes, AI could bring better preparation for natural disasters or smarter, efficient workplace, but it also could create privacy violations and deep fakes in the media and algorithmic bias that builds on inequalities and increases socioeconomic inequality. It could deepen our isolation as humans as people retreat behind their screens, especially because of no fear of viruses. So just imagine the year 2040 when we have a deepening, if you will, of the haves and the have-nots, and there's a global condo owners association where the riches of the rich live, and then there is a cybersecurity breach because they have been, for example, using more data than they should have been using, or more carbon footprint or something, and this is hacked and their names and privacy are breached. This is the kind of question that we ask when we look out at the future. And the fact is, when we think about the future, we have to explore our guiding metaphors and myths that we use to envision the future. What people say in the Middle East is not the same as in the United States, or what they say in Asia. Outside of the West, convenient issues as fork on the road or a rolling a dice or going through a rearview mirror are not ideas that compute. I mean, a lot of cultures use the idea of weaving and growing and emerging. So as we think about this future, my ask when I talk about human futures is to say, how can we be a better crew member in this world? How can we be a better leader of our little circle of influence? How can we be co-creators of the 21st century, which is thriving? And how can we help narrate, co-create a new story of human flourishing? A call to tribalism. Tribalism, not tribalism, right? So the future we want has been defined very clearly for us in the Sustainable Development Goals, which they say should be done by 2030, which we know won't be done by 2030, but which we hope will be done sooner or before 2050, and all within using this idea of a safe, just space for humanity and rethinking our economic metrics so that we look at metrics that keep us within the boundaries, that ecological ceiling, as well as the social boundaries we don't want to fall behind. And so as we talk about the future with space, for example, we can imagine AI being enabling systems in Lunarville solar power, and that's a good thing. It sounds positive. We want to make sure that people who are thriving on the moon settlements, I'm using that term, Leslie, has really benefited from what we've learned in AI and all the hardware and software that going into improving that. But when we think about 2035 and that world where we're on the moon, what are the other questions we might ask about how AI is sharing our decision making? Minority rights, decision support systems, human rights versus corporate rights, the right to information, the use of decision support system, and indeed AI rights. Korea already has in place a robot rights, this article of things that a robot has the right to achieve. How are we going to share decisions around AI design and development, deployment, which are very much going to change the DNA of humanity and the human experience? We hear people talking about AI embedded in our consciousness, so we no longer need to remember formulas, but that is embedded in our consciousness, or by virtue of a contact lens in which the data is imprinted that we wear so we don't have to study for exams. Algorithm bias is already a real thing. So one of the things we have to think about as we think about human future is perhaps reimagining AI as a public good. And putting in place a sort of a global movement for a World AI Day 2022, where we affirm the importance of cherishing AI as a public good, and then deciding how do we share the rulebook around design, development, and deployment across all ecosystems. And you know what I mean, a public good, a global public good, in the same way that air is the global public good, in the economic sense, that AI should be thought about like how we think about water and air and other things. It should not just be about the private sector providing these services, but in fact, because AI is so much a part of the future that we are going to live in, AI should be seen as a public good where we have private and public partnership, because the fact is there is no global government organization that can manage and control AI. So if you think about 2030, and another AI headline would be something like this one in which a cosmetic giant is sued for promoting beauty bias. We already know that AI is creating bias around skin color and building on the stereotypes that say dark skin is not beautiful. How do we ensure systems that monitor such biases in the future? Could be skin color, it could be eye color, who knows? What is this new human that we will be creating? What is the progeny, the synergy that we might have if we continue down our path of using AI without thinking critically about the future we want? Can we see through this glass darkly? Can we see clearly? How will life emerge in 2030, 2040, 2050, 2060, 2070? These are the questions we must ask when we talk about human futures. Even in religion, AI is not absent. We already have robot priests in place in Japan, robots which are programmed to spout out witticisms or ideas of Zen Buddhism to people as they walk by. But what if this was hacked? This headline, imagine a Buddhist priest AI being hacked, and that artifact sprouting gibberish or swear words. It could be a Hindu ritual robot. These things are already on the shelf of being tested in our current human experience. How might that emerge? Human futures, how will our life be different in an AI-enabled future? What is our human future in transportation, in manufacturing, in healthcare, as we just heard about, and personalized medicine, and all of the things that are coming down the pike because of AI? What is this future we want? How do we share decision making? How do we share AI? What are then the jobs we ought to be thinking about if we want to create human futures that are better for all? Are we going to have AI ethicists? Is that already on the table? Who gets to decide what are the ethics by which the AI ethicists will make a decision? It's a system of system wicked problem. How will we have AI jobs, for example, that make sure that the avatar that is said to be you is really you? There's a lot of potential minefields, as in MINE, that could blow up if we're not prepared to meet the future with the right attitude and the right altitude, and truly imagine how we might ensure that we co-create a world of thriving, a world of flourishing. But Minister Fuller says, you never change things by fighting the existing reality, but to change something, you must build a new system that makes the existing system obsolete. So I think in terms of creating human futures, we need to think about how are we going to classify AI as a public good. And I have come across Barrett taxonomy, where it says that we might look at AI as it is right now, but worse as it becomes artificial super intelligence, or the singularity that we have heard so much about, Ray Kurzweil and those folks, that is approaching 2030, 2040. Because if we're talking about a singularity, it's a whole different level of threat to human futures than currently is. I would like to propose that as we think about ourselves as futurists, that we first of all begin to support the notion of AI as a public good paradigm. Begin to think about how in our own avenues, because AI is everywhere, it's ubiquitous. Whether you're working as an educator, as a consultant, you begin to take the consciousness of asking that question: how am I ensuring in the workshops I'm running, in the classes I'm teaching, in the lectures I am looking at, when we look at AI, that we're talking about AI as a public good? Would we, for example, want to propose that we apply Asimov's 3 laws of robotics? And will that work given the new type of AI that's being designed even now? They have designed AIs that can write poetry, AI that can write music. That means the whole intellectual property law is going to change. And the musicians that are using AI, to whom does the composition belong? Does it belong to the person who created the AI or the composer? Are we going to apply Japan's 10 principles of robot law or South Korea's principles of robot rights? These are questions that we have to be addressing right now in order to design our human futures. And again, the question is, how do we as futurists ensure that there are enough futures literacy in those who are making the decision to look at the second, third, and fourth orders consequences of the decision they make? I am proposing that we also consider, besides futures literacy, AI literacy. People able to see the look at what they're seeing and query if it's disinformation or misinformation. People who can create vehicles and software itself to investigate how AI might be used for creating a new type of a war. Watchdogs, audiences that understand that they should always query if something feels unsensible, it probably is insensible. So we want to move from competition to competition. We want to move from independence to interdependence. We want to recognize that on Spaceship Earth, there are no passengers, we are all crew. It's one system, one planet, and as Bob Marley would say, one love. So we have to be like a dragonfly and see the future we want with 360 degrees and ultraviolet, and as well as be the butterfly and be the future we want, because we understand that as the butterfly, our small actions have the ability to co-create the impact for a global shift towards a more thriving futures. We all have to think about ourselves as evolutionary leaders that are facilitating the transformation to this thrival paradigm, that we can deal with paradox, whole system awareness, we can deal with personal power, systems thinking, all the things that futures literacy gives us. I like to say we have to develop future sense, with the capacity of individuals to absorb oncoming change systematically with sensitivity and sensibility, and identify emerging challenge so that we can become smart leaders, system thinkers with social intelligence, intellectual intelligence, emotional intelligence, and spiritual intelligence. We have to embrace all our intelligences. In other words, we have to develop future sense. Again, what I believe is that we are one planet, one humanity, and indeed, although we might be 7.5 billion or 8 billion strong by 2030, it's still one planetary story. We have to come up with a story that shows that even though we live in different individual worlds, we still share one world where we're either the flock of those that are saved or the flock of those that are condemned. And so take with us this consciousness of ourselves as futures leaders that are helping to co-create thriving human futures. Smart futures are ours to create. And my question for you in the WFSF community and our friends, how will you help shape the evolution of our common human futures? I want to thank you so much for listening, for your time. And of course, if we have anybody to ask questions, I will take some questions now. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Are there any questions? Are there any questions? All right, there's no questions in the chat. And it seems as if we only have 2 people attending and there are no questions. Are there any questions, anyone that's attending? Okay. Alicia, attendee, no? Okay, with that, I just want to say again, thank you all for being here. And hopefully this recording will be put to good use as part of the archives of the event. With that, I wish you all well and a good and great evening and afternoon. Thank you. Bye-bye.